recently came across a quote by the actor Tom Hardy, and it struck me as really interesting. I want to read it for you. He said, "Being alone for a while is dangerous. It's addicting. Once you see how peaceful it is, you don't want to deal with other people anymore." Now, if you're an introvert, you probably just thought, amen. If you're an extrovert, you might not agree with that completely. But that quote really struck me because I think that a lot of people can relate to it right now. You know, this past year has affected us all in a multitude of different ways, but one way that it's affected us all in the same way is that it's caused us to be alone a lot more. Due to lockdowns and events canceled and activities postponed, we've all had to be alone a lot more. We've had to be just with our families. Maybe you live alone. We've just been forced to be alone more than we would. And it's interesting what he said in that quote. I don't think I've ever thought about being alone as being addicting, that it can actually become addicting, like a habit. You keep wanting to be alone more. And I don't think I've ever thought about it that way. But maybe you're the person, maybe you started working from home since the pandemic started, and you don't have to deal with your coworkers anymore that you used to. And you might think, man, this is a lot easier to just be at home, work on my own. I don't have to deal with this person. You might think this is kind of nice. Or maybe you've been attending church online since the pandemic and you don't have to come to service. You can just sit on your couch. You don't have to have conversations and small talk with people. You don't have to go to group and share personal information. And you might be tempted to think, man, this is easier. This is nicer to just kind of do my own thing, to just be alone and just keep things that way. Maybe it's not so bad what this past year has brought about. But the one thing I think he said in that quote that is 100% true is that being alone is dangerous. And we know that this is true because God said that it's true. In Genesis 2, he created Adam, and after he created Adam, he said, "It is not good for man to be alone." And he went on to create Eve. But from the very beginning, God knew this is not going to work out good. Just man by himself, it is not good. And the Bible actually speaks to this more. In Ecclesiastes 4, 7 through 12, I want to read you this passage. And the title of this passage is The Advantages of Companionship. It says, "I observed yet another example of something meaningless under the sun. This is the case of a man who is all alone, without a child or a brother, yet who works hard to gain as much wealth as he can. But then he asks himself, 'Who am I working for? Why am I giving up so much pleasure now? It is all so meaningless and depressing.' Two people are better off than one, for they can help each other succeed. If one person falls, the other can reach out and help. But someone who falls alone is in real trouble. Likewise, two people lying close together can keep each other warm. But how can one be warm alone? A person standing alone can be attacked and defeated, but two can stand back to back and conquer. Three are even better, for a triple braided cord is not easily broken." Being alone is dangerous. And in this verse, it talks a lot about being physically alone. It's using that picture of how being physically alone can be really dangerous. You know, you can fall and there's nobody there to help you back up. You can get really cold and there's no one there to keep you warm. You could be attacked really easily if you're on your own. And physically, that's certainly true, but it's talking more than just about being physically alone. It's talking about being alone spiritually, emotionally, how that can be really dangerous to us as well. You know, it talks about if you're alone and you fall, there's no one there to help you get back up. And spiritually, there's going to be times when we all fall, when we struggle, when we get down, when we can't just get back up on our own. We need somebody else to reach out their hand to us and to help us back up. You know, there's going to be times when you get cold. And if you're all by yourself and you're cold, there's going to be no way for you to get warm. But if there's somebody by your side, somebody to come sleep next to you and give you warmth, man, that makes all the difference. And it's not that the weather's going to change, but just having that person there, sometimes you just need somebody to stand by your side in a tough time, in a cold season, to keep you warm, to give you encouragement, to keep you going in that season. You know, if you're all by yourself and you're being attacked, man, you're going to be easily defeated if you're by yourself. But it says if you have somebody else with you, they can stand back to back and they can help you fight. You weren't meant to fight your battles alone. You were meant to have somebody, some people to stand back to back with you and to help you fight. And that verse says, I love it. It says that alone you can be conquered. But man, if you have somebody with you standing back to back fighting, you can conquer. We weren't meant to live this life alone. You weren't created to live in isolation. It's unnatural. God created us to live in community with one another. And I just want to speak to you today, to somebody who's thinking, you know what, living alone, it's not so bad. It's easier. I think that I'm just going to keep to myself. I think that I'm good just living away from relationship with others. And I just would love to challenge you. Are you really good? Are you really better off living without other people, without those relationships that maybe you once had? Or are you feeling more anxious this past year? Are you feeling more depressed? Are you feeling more lonely? Because being alone is dangerous. I want to encourage you as we continue to transition into life after 2020, as we're kind of integrating more into society, more into relationships with each other again. You might be tempted to keep living life alone, to keep in the habits that maybe you formed over this past year. Maybe it seems easier to keep isolated, to keep away from other people, to not risk having relationships, of having to maybe be hurt in relationships, to have to give to relationships. It might seem easier to just live on your own. And it may be easier, that's very true, but it's not better because we weren't meant to live life alone. And don't let the enemy convince you that living alone is better. Because the enemy knows that if he can get you alone, if he can get you living your life in isolation, man, you're going to be so easily defeated when you're by yourself. You can get knocked down. There's going to be nobody there to help you up. But if you live life in community with other believers, man, when you fall down, somebody is going to be there to help you back up. When you get cold, somebody is going to be there to be beside you, to help keep you warm. And when you have a battle that's too big to fight on your own, you're going to have people that are going to stand back to back with you to fight with you, and you can conquer if you have other people by your side. Don't let living alone become your new normal. You were meant to live your life in community with other people.
I'm Bob Uzumeki, and this is my wife,
Christina Uzumeki.
I think I did that weird. Or like,
Do you
I'm
wanna
Bob
do it again?
Uzumeki.
You can do overtime.
I'm Bob Uzumeki,
And I am Christina Uzumeki.
and we're members of Acts Church for probably 3 or 4 years now.
I was raised in a Baptist school and church my whole life, and I mean, there's things that are biblical, but there's also things that are taught that when I kind of grew up and realized like maybe it's not what I personally believe, I was just believing it because that's what I was told. Growing up, a lot of it was based off of you knew you were being judged when you walked in that church door, and that was the hardest part. I mean, you weren't allowed to be a certain way or do a certain thing, and that was the main thing that drew me to Acts that I loved was just be you.
I had different religious backgrounds and with the blended family going to and fro, and I was very confused, and at even a very young age almost denounced going to church, period, just because you don't want to offend your mom by siding with your dad and offend your dad by siding with your mom's religious views. So at 10 years old even, I was like, you know what, I'm done. it was really weird. I distinctly remember there was a point, and I can't even bring on the date or the timeline, but very fortunately, like everything was going good. Like, we had just your typical American family struggles. We weren't loaded, but we weren't dirt poor. I didn't have this big feeling of, oh, I really need Jesus in my life. I had this feeling that I needed something in my life, that just something was missing. Like there was a hole there, despite kids happy. Everybody was happy and healthy. So I feel very fortunate that that's kind of how I found Christ. But as soon as we started going to Acts more, I was like, wow, I'm getting goosebumps thinking of it. This is exactly what I needed. I needed more of this in my life.
Kind of as, our relationship grew as a married couple, and we talked more about faith and wanting to hopefully someday teach our kids that there is a God and all this without tying in all the religion practices part of it. I feel like it really just helped open the door for the opportunity of talking about God in our home. I think that was the hard part for me, is I don't even know how to approach my kids about telling them about God, because I don't want to confuse them. I don't want them to feel how I did and pushed on the religion side of it. And so that was a hard part for me, was just introducing who God was. How do you explain how great He is without confusion as such a small child? And so even them just being Acts kids, I think was a good starting point. And they don't always even remember what the service is about, but then we'll talk about something at dinner and they'll be like, oh, a light bulb moment. I saw this in Acts, in Acts Kids.
Since Acts has come in our life, it's grown our marriage, and it inspires me to be a better person, a better husband, a better father. So that's something that is invaluable. There's just no way to put a price tag on that.
Being raised the way I was, not that there was anything wrong with it, but I have this wall of if you're not this perfect person, you're not worthy to be seen. That's probably just a personal thing, but and just the fact that I could just be myself and be like, we're just like you. Cameron did some of the same things that we did growing up, and it's like, he's not perfect. And just seeing that there's real people out there that you can connect with has tremendously helped me accept where I am in my faith. That like I always feel like I should be this holy, but I'm only here, and so it was just nice to be like, you're okay here. You're at your own pace. We're here whether you're here or here. So the Alpha group for me, I've gone through like 1.5-ish. He's done it twice. The first time, like you said, I was pregnant and I had a hard time with it. But then when we just did it the second time around, when we walked into our Alpha group for the first time and mid-pandemic, not being around anybody, I can't even explain it. It was just this like these are going to be my people that I'm hanging out with for the next however many weeks. And like I knew some of them, I didn't know half of them, and like being in that smaller group was really encouraging, because you can start talking to people, just having conversation, and you realize like there's a lot more people out there like us than we realize. You think like, oh, we're a blended family, it's not a good thing, and you start talking to all these people, and it's like in our group, and it was like, well, they're a blended family, and they're a blended family, and all of a sudden you just get this like sense of security, like, okay, maybe we're not so weird.
So the group itself was just so pivotal. Besides all of that, it allowed you to be with people, other people who are in the same walks of life. So we could listen to a message at home and be like, oh, that makes sense, but everybody's going to hear a different part of it. And getting in group and having a bunch of people who hear different part of it and can talk it over, I got way more out of it if I would just found an Alpha course online and watch all the videos. Being able to converse with people and talk with it over. Like, oh, I didn't see that point, but it's so valid, and it just puts a whole new twist on things. So it gave good direction, it gave good fellowship, it gave good everything.
Good food.
It did give good food. Yeah, fortunately, between Alpha group, and I've had a couple of groups, or a group that I meet with a guy from work, but it gives me more consistency, and I find it's a huge difference. Like as soon as I fall short on weekly readings, or I don't read the Bible as much, like I can tell. I can really tell a difference in my psyche and how I carry myself. But as soon as I really get back into it, and even just as little as bringing it into the workplace, that's something I never would have done but being able to converse with each other about it makes it a lot easier to converse with others, and not completely strangers, not like going door to door and witnessing, but getting to know somebody and then being able to be like, extend that conversation into the faith realm. I'd have never have been able to done that before the groups, and being able to talk with my faith with other people, not just studying it to myself.
And even just hearing the other women's thoughts and experiences, and hey, I need prayer for this because this is our family situation, and seeing that you're not the only one with issues, and a lot of these people are experiencing the same pains and the same problems, and it was just really comforting to be like, okay.
Sure.
To me, it just all factors around that building relationship, and I guess through all of this, I've learned that the church is a building, but the church is the people, and I'm really starting to get that. And even being raised in church my whole life, I don't think I ever could have said that. But now that I'm actually building those relationships, you can really see that the people are the church.
Well, there's a verse that's always meant a lot to me, because it's my experience 27 years ago when we first started going to church. And it's Acts 2:42. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. I think there's a lot of people that would look at that and think it's really important, obviously, to get the scriptures figured out. But it was also making a point there that it was really important for us just to spend time together. And those moments of breaking bread together, those simple times that we would spend are so important. I wasn't raised in a church. I didn't know anything about God. I had no idea about the Bible. And on those days when me and my kids first walked in, we were all really nervous. We didn't know what to expect. And at that time, it was just me along with an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old. And John wasn't with us. He hadn't made the decision yet to come to Christ. And he still wouldn't for 7 years. I remember at that time feeling really alone, kind of being sad that I didn't have my whole family there with me. But I didn't realize at the time how much those people that I was going to church with would become a family to me. They would be with us at church and we'd spend time together, and then afterwards they would ask us if we wanted to go out to dinner with them and hang out with them and talk to them. And a lot of times we would go. But there were also times where I said, I can't go today. I don't have the money to go. And they were always so generous and kind that they'd always want to jump in and say, no, we want to pay for you. We want you guys to go. We want you to be part of this with us. These people were so generous, and they were so caring, and they were so kind, and it was exactly what I needed in those moments. They got to know us. They just spent time getting to know us. And they spent time with us, just listening to the things that we were going through. I didn't realize it at the time then how important those dinners at 4-Star was going to be in my faith. But they were so important. It was just those moments of sharing little experiences throughout our days, the things that we were going through that made a difference in my faith. Looking back on those moments of just breaking bread together, they were what comforted me and challenged me and grew my faith so much, and it kept me going. I didn't even know that I needed those people so much, but somehow they knew that I needed those people at that moment. I think sometimes we really don't understand how much it is that we need each other. The one thing that God wants us to do is He wants us to live in community with one another. That we would be there for each other. Just spending time together is so important. I think it's important for us to really spend time alone in the presence of God, to learn and to grow, to read the Bible and reflect on it and have those experiences by ourselves. But I think sometimes we really shortchange the idea of how important it is for us to spend time together in a community, to gather together, because I think a lot of really special things happen when we're together. Ecclesiastes 4:9 says 2 people are better off than one, for they can help each other succeed. In those moments when I would spend time with them sitting at 4-Star, they were helping me succeed. I just thought it was a simple time of having coffee and visiting, but over time I realized that they were growing my faith by just being there for each other. God wants us to trust each other. He wants us to rely and depend on each other. To carry each other's burdens. He wants us, to take that upon ourselves when somebody's going through a tough time, that we would help them get through it. A lot of times that we would just be there to warn each other. Maybe if we have an experience that we're going too close to the edge, that we'd say, hey, maybe this isn't such a good thing for you. Or just you really, sometimes I think we underestimate those moments of just shared joy that we would experience with one another. It's loving each other and helping each other and spurring each other on, and sometimes even sharpening one another that's important in a community. I remember when I first started going to church and I was there, going for quite some time. I remember my pastor one day after church saying to me, have you ever thought about, coming to Sunday school? And at the time, I was like, I don't need that too. I'm getting just enough what I need right now by going to church, and I don't think I need to go to Sunday school. But over time, when he'd ask me, I think, okay, maybe I'll go. And I didn't realize how important Sunday school was to me. Now, we obviously don't have Sunday school at Acts Church, but we have groups. I didn't realize when I was there that when someone would talk about a Bible verse, that it was exactly what I needed to hear. Or if someone asked a question, it was a question that I also had and was answered. And it helped me to grow. God was working the room. I think a lot of times we don't realize that God's working on so many different levels in our lives, and he's working through so many people, and he helps us in so many different areas of our life. I didn't even know I needed help in certain areas that we talked about in Sunday school. But God built up my faith by so many people, as I went along in community. One time I remember we were going through just a tough time financially, and we couldn't pay a bill. And it was an experience that I was going through myself, and I hadn't shared it with anybody. But God used somebody inside the church that day to come up to me and give me some money to pay a bill. And, it was an awesome thing. I remember walking away and going home and telling John, he wasn't even going to church, and saying that, somebody came up and just gave me this money. It was such a blessing for us. And it grew his faith a little bit at time after time. I think sometimes we don't understand that we can't be blessed, and we also can't bless another person if we're not there. Just being there with one another is so important. I think sometimes we underestimate those little experiences that we have with one another. How we can grow each other, how we can challenge each other. I remember one time in the summer just sitting by the campfire and was reminded about how much it is that we need one another. When I was sitting outside by the fire. I was outside by this fire, and it's raging hot, and all these logs are burning together. But over time, one by one, they started to go out until it just came down to this one log. It was burning alone, and the fire was just about snuffed out, until I began to add more logs on top of it, to that single lonely little piece of wood. And then soon the fire burst into flame again, and it started to put out light and heat again. This is exactly what we do for each other, to help each other to burn hotter. When we separate ourselves from each other, we only grow dimmer and colder in our faith. It's so important for us to have each other to build off of. We need one another. It's so important to have somebody there with you to share the highs and the lows, to have those experiences where someone can encourage you when you're down. I think one of the worst things that the enemy does is he tells us that we don't need to go somewhere where we're down. Don't go to church today. You're not feeling so good. Just, maybe stay back, stay home. And I think it's the worst thing we could possibly do. There's been so many experiences where someone tells me, I was going to go last week, but I really didn't want to go because I didn't feel so good. And I'm always inside my head screaming, thinking, that's when you should have been here. That's when God was going to speak something great to you. That's when someone was going to encourage you when you needed it. We were never meant to live life alone. We were always supposed to live together. Even the Lone Ranger had Tonto. We're always supposed to do life together. We're better together.
Hey, so here we are 1 year into all of this COVID stuff, all these mitigations, right? In fact, I was going to ask you guys, what are you doing to celebrate the 1 year anniversary of 2 weeks to flatten the curve that we're still in? Nah, just joking. But along the way with all this COVID stuff, it's interesting because there's been a lot of guidance that's been given. But I've also heard some things that I honestly believe are misguidance. And one of the statements that I heard early on that I thought, I don't know about that, was the statement said in Illinois that was, we're stronger apart. We're stronger apart. Now, I get the idea of what that means. They're trying to kind of play on that idea because you think that doesn't make sense. But hey, if we separate, we won't have these issues. But the problem with that statement is that it is incredibly myopic and unsophisticated, right? It doesn't cover the broad spectrum at all. And whenever we make a statement like that, we have to consider things because things aren't done in a vacuum. Whatever we do that might be a positive in one aspect could add negatives in another aspect. I will give you an example for sure. I could say, you're healthier eating kale. You're healthier eating kale. And you're like, oh man, kale, ugh, I know, absolutely, terrible, right? But I could give you that statement and I could say, well, you'll be healthier. You're healthier when you eat kale. And in one sense, that could be true because you were going to go get yourself a Big Mac and you're like, I'll eat kale instead. And it's like, hey, terrific. You didn't eat a bunch of calories you didn't need, and you ate something that had some vitamins and nutrients in it. But that statement has an issue with it because it has no quantifiers, it has no clarifiers, just like this other one, where you'd say, well, you're healthier eating kale. But if you end up just saying, okay, so if I'm healthier eating kale, I'm just gonna eat kale. That's it. I'm healthier eating kale. So kale it is, kale it is, kale it is, except for the fact that, of course, there are plenty of vitamins that you wouldn't get. If you just go, well, I believe that they said I'm healthier eating kale, so I'm gonna eat kale. Well, the other half of that is, of course, that by eating kale, you're not eating something else, which has other vitamins and other nutrients that you need as well. Not only that, but even something that can be positive. If we do too much of it, it can be negative. In fact, kale, believe it or not, this is your saving grace if you're looking for a reason to not eat too much kale. They actually found that if you eat too much kale, believe it or not, it can actually end up hurting your metabolism through your thyroid, that it can mess up your thyroid and it can actually mess up your metabolism. So even something that's good done too much can actually be a negative. See, that statement in itself, just like that, you're healthier eating kale, again, it's way too myopic. It's way too unsophisticated. There needs to be an explanation that goes with that. For the benefit that that brings, it brings negatives as well. And that's what I felt when I heard this statement, we're stronger apart. I thought, man, but the problem is, for all the benefit that brings, it brings negatives in all these other pieces. And see, the problem is that when we compare these things, when we make a statement, we have to consider the broad spectrum, because if something is positive in one pinpoint area, but it creates negatives in almost all other areas, then that statement loses its value. In fact, I would even argue the fact that if it does the opposite of what it means to do, that it actually is a lie. And that's what I believe that statement is. We're stronger apart, I believe, is a lie, because I believe God spoke the exact opposite. And yes, even during something like a pandemic, I think it still has to be considered about all the negatives that would come with that, because I believe God actually made us to be stronger together. You see, our God created us to be in community. In fact, He did it because He is community. We don't think about this very often, but even our God is a communal being. It says this in Luke 3:21 through 22. This is the story of Jesus being baptized, and we see the picture of the Trinity come together. It says this: one day when the crowds were being baptized, Jesus himself was baptized, and as he was praying, the heavens opened, the Holy Spirit in bodily form descended on him like a dove, and a voice from heaven said, "You are my dearly loved Son, and you bring me great joy." There's a situation where we literally see the Trinity coming together, that our God is three persons in one. He is community in and of himself. And I know that Jesus wanted us to live this way as well too, because when he was here on this earth, he prayed to God this prayer in John 17:21. I pray that they, meaning his disciples and us, will all be one, just as you and I are one, as you are in me, Father, and I am in you. You see, his prayer was that we would experience that same kind of deep community that he experiences with God and with the Holy Spirit, that we're meant to be strong together, that we would not be alone, because that would actually make us weaker. You know, in this last year, with all this craziness, you might have had the same experience that I had. And it was just coming to a realization again of how, like, our safety and our security is like this fake thing that we put around us, right? Like, we think like we're safe, we're stable, we're okay. But in all reality, this world is far beyond our control. And when those moments happen, I don't know how you feel, but I all of a sudden realize my need for God. My need for God to be bringing things into my life, for someone else who I trust to be in control when things look out of control. And listen, I believe that God wants to give you the gifts you need to be able to succeed in seasons like this, in hard seasons that are coming in your life. But you might be surprised where he hides those gifts that you need in order to succeed. In fact, Peter, one of the disciples, he ended up writing this in 1 Peter 4:10. God has given each of you a gift from his variety of spiritual gifts. He says he has this great variety, and he's given each of us one of them. Use them well to serve one another. So it says that basically God has given us gifts, probably actually more than one, to be honest with you. We might find one that we're really, really gifted in, but God's given us a number of these different spiritual gifts, but it seems as though what he's painting is he has this broad variety of gifts, and he gives some to each person. He doesn't give one person all of them. He kind of gives some doled out to each person. And what we would expect is that it would say, God has given us these spiritual gifts for our own lives and the struggles we will face, right? Like if you're going to face this, God's going to give you these gifts to cover it. If he's going to face this, God's going to give him those gifts to cover it. But that's not what the statement says. It doesn't say God has given us these gifts to cover our issues. It actually says this. He's given us these gifts out of his great variety of spiritual gifts. And then it says, use them well to serve one another. There's a surprising part inside of this. And it's this: God gives the spiritual gifts that you need to someone else. And he gives the spiritual gifts that they need to you. Think about that. That's what this is pointing to. That the spiritual gifts that you need to require to be able to get through what it is that's happening in your life, he actually gave to someone else. And then the gifts that they needed, he gave to you. And you would think, man, why would God do that? That's a terrible joke to play, right? That's a terrible joke to play at us and mess us up. But it reminds me of a parable, a story I heard once before, and I don't know if it's true. But it was a dad who basically had 3 sons, and they were always fighting. They were never getting along. They were never cooperating. So one day he came home and he had 3 gifts, and he sat them down and he said, here, I bought you guys 3 individual gifts. And as the boys unwrapped them, this is what they found. The first one opened it up and he found an RC car. He's like, this is awesome, right? The next one opened up his gift and he found an RC car remote. And then the third boy opened up his gift, and it was the batteries for the RC remote and for the car. And you think, why would the dad do that? That's such a mean prank to play. But the dad understood that if he gave his kids these gifts, it would force them to collaborate and work together in order to enjoy what he had given them. You see, I think the reason why God has given your gift to someone else and why he's given their gift to you is because God wanted his children to get along and to be in community, just as Jesus said. That we're supposed to share each other's lives, and our gifts that have been given to us are meant to bless other people, and theirs are meant to bless us as well. He gave us each other's gifts so that we would be forced to work together in a positive way. If you aren't in community, you can't receive the gifts you need. If you aren't in community, you can't give those gifts to someone else. So here's what this means for us. For our church, right, at this season, we believe that we are stronger together. So what we're going to do is we're going to continue to fight for opportunities to pull you together when it comes to these things that are online, but also in person where people can get to know each other and see each other and shake hands for sure. But also what we're going to do is we are going to lean back into groups. We do groups multiple times throughout the year, and this has been a hard season in this past year to figure out what it's going to look like. But we are going to push back into groups because we really do believe we're stronger together. What this means is if you've been a group leader before, I'm calling you to consider leading a group again, leading a different group, leading in a different way. If you've been part of a group consistently in the past, it might be time for you to lead a group for the very first time, because our goal is to have groups ready for people as soon as Easter comes. A month from now, when Easter comes, on the backside of that, we want to have groups that kick off right there in the spring and lead into the beginning of the summer to give people an opportunity to reconnect and to recreate those friendships and to have this opportunity to share gifts. For you, there's definitely a next step you need to take. It might be that you need to venture back out into some sort of physical gathering, like the church services we do on the weekend, where you've been apart for so long and you want to come back in and experience some of that together. Some of you need to almost relearn how to do that. But maybe you're not there yet, but I can tell you one of the things that would be super beneficial for you is in a month from now when these groups launch and these small gatherings of people huddle together, some of them outside, inside, all these different places around, public places in people's houses, is to find one that fits for you and join a community. To find a group that fits for you and then be part of it where you can be known and you can share some of your life with people again. And certainly all of us can take this step, okay? I think all of us have let some friendships slip in this last year. It was way too easy. It was way too just like, oh, I can't do that. I can't go out there. But all of us could take a step in this next coming week, in this next coming month, to get back together with someone for coffee, to have someone over to our house for dinner, to get the kids together and play with another set of kids and have some fun. Because listen, even with all of this going on, the reality is we're stronger when we're together. If you're not part of community, then you can't receive the gifts that you need to be able to make it through this next season. And if you're not part of community, you can't give them to someone else. We're stronger when we're together, and you're meant to be a part of it.